Alright guys, so what we're going to do today is a video lesson. There'll be time for you to pause the video and audio in order to make sure you get the notes copied down, but listen to the explanation as I go through. So this is your teaching video. So I will not be teaching additional on this. I will be answering questions if you have it. You will need to go ahead and put in your notebook agriculture/aquaculture so that you know what this particular slide is going to be about when you try to find the answers in your notes. We talked about agriculture yesterday. We're extending now to aquaculture. And as you can tell by the picture and the word aqua, this is what cultivation and farming is in the water. So what I want you to do right now is pause the video and copy these notes. Okay, so hopefully you got those notes copied. What we have here is agriculture, and we're going to recap agriculture. The key word for agriculture we talked about yesterday is that cultivation. Okay, so agriculture is a cultivation of organisms for human benefit to sustain life. And yesterday we explained, when we think about agriculture, we know we think about fruits and vegetables, but we can't forget things like fibers, which is the cotton in your clothes, for example. We also cannot forget about things like Christmas tree. We talked about the Christmas tree farming. So there's a couple of things there. So this is important. Agriculture is important for human life. We need to be able to domesticate animals, use crops, things like that. And agriculture has actually been a key development in the rise of human civilization. So because of agriculture, we've been able to grow further as people in the world. So also thinking along those same lines of agriculture, think about in history you heard of hunter-gatherers, okay? The gatherers were closer to your agricultural people. Alright, so pause the video, copy the notes. So now we're looking at aquaculture. So aquaculture is the farming of aquatic organisms. Okay? So this includes, for example, fish. So tilapia is one of the most popular farm-raised fish that there are. Okay? Also, you have things like salmon. Some salmon are wild salmon that are caught. That's your kind of pinkish inside-looking fish. And some salmon is your grown on farms, or not grown on farms, but they are harvested in aquacultural farms. Then you have crustaceans. Okay, your crustaceans include your crabs and your lobsters. And then you have your mollusks. Your mollusks are going to be your oysters and your clams. So these things you will find being farmed. So yes, you find them in the wild, but for production's sake of actually selling them to restaurants or grocery stores, you're going to find them on farms. Now, when you do this, or when this gets done, it has to be a very controlled environment. Okay? You have to control the conditions as best you can when it comes to aquaculture and marine life. Okay, pause the video, copy your notes. Alright, so this is going in traditional farming or traditional agriculture and aquaculture. It actually goes for both. And tomorrow we'll talk more about traditional versus your modern techniques. Okay? So with your traditional methods, farmers use pesticides and chemical fertilizers to harvest crops. That's how it's traditionally done or normally done. We talked about pesticides as those chemicals that are used to sustain the crops. And they use to sustain the crops by eliminating, killing off is a good example of organisms they don't want near their crop. And the chemical fertilizers are used as a way to give nutrients, grow faster, larger type organisms. And I say organisms because this refers to aqua and agriculture. They also use growth hormones. That's growth hormones to make crops and livestock bigger. So that's a different those different types of, how do I put this? Excuse me, pausing for a second. I want you to think of it like they say steroids, for example. That's growth hormones. Not that they're putting steroids on your food. I'm comparing it to that. Okay? Now, why do they do this? Well, it's good for business. You want the biggest and best crop that you can absolutely have. Okay? And that biggest and best crop comes by adding something. But it is bad for the environment. The way that it is bad for the environment is because we talked about pesticides and fertilizers actually leaking into the groundwater that we have. So this is a continuation. Go ahead and pause the video and get that copy. So with traditional and agriculture and aquaculture, the advantages are your crops are bigger and they taste better. Okay, they do. They do have a better taste to them. Most prefer the taste of crops that have been modified, we'll say. Secondly, it's more profitable. So business picks up. You're selling the biggest, the baddest ones, baddest in a good way, ones that they have. More crops are out there, therefore you can make more money. The disadvantage goes back again to that environmental issue of your pesticides and fertilizers can seep into your groundwater. So not only can they seep into your groundwater, in addition to that, they can, if you over irrigate, remember that word from yesterday? If you over irrigate, they can also flow into streams and rivers, which will contaminate the environment in that area, the ecosystem in that area. Now we want to move from that traditional farming over to the sustainable farming, or sustainable agriculture. So pause the video, copy your notes. Okay, so I stated before you copied your notes, we want to move from more traditional to sustainable. So with sustainable practices, food is not genetically modified. Okay? On your packages of food, you'll start noticing no GMOs. That means that they did not genetically in some way change what you are eating. The modifications are not to be harmful. The modifications are to increase food production. So, with that said, that's more of your organic food, okay? And your organic food is grown without the use of pesticides, fertilizers, or growth hormones. But I want you to keep in mind as we hear that, when they say without pesticides, fertilizers, or growth hormones, fertilizers and pesticides are normally with your traditional farming and will always be your traditional farming. But they still do things on the organic side that are more natural. So what I mean by that is they have pesticides, but not the chemical ones developed in like labs. Their version of getting rid of something is going to be, for example, aphids. They'll use a combination of soap and water to spray the crops, and that'll get rid of the aphids instead of throwing out, and aphids are pesticides that eat on, I think, like lettuce or whatnot. And they will spray that instead of spraying that chemical things, man-made stuff that came from a lab. Okay? They do fertilize their crop, but they don't use those chemical fertilizers that can seep into the ground and cause issues. They use more natural fertilizer like cow manure, okay? And they don't have growth hormones. Now, what is this? It is good for the environment, however, profits are reduced. I want you to look at this, okay? In this picture, we see that there are people. And you're like, oh, duh, Miss Ellis, I know. But there, for organic farming, or sustainable, especially organic farming practices, it takes more people than machines to run. So machines don't cost normally as much as people do, obviously. So to continually pay people to do this becomes expensive, but we'll talk about that in a second. All right, pause the video, copy your notes. All right, crop rotation. Please put a big old star by crop rotation because it's on your test, okay? It's the practice of growing different types of crops in the same area consecutive seasons, okay? So, for example, the first year on his farm, the farmer would grow celery, onions, garlic. Well, the next year he would grow radishes and carrots. The next year you see all the different vegetables he would grow. In the 4th year, he would grow peas. Okay? And this rotation would continue for however many years. I think 4 may be the typical type of years. But why is this important? Why is this a good thing? Well, one, it reduces soil erosion. So you're moving the crops around, you're moving the soil around, but it's for a purpose of not great. If you just grow that one thing, the soil doesn't get packed as it should be. Okay? The second reason is increases soil fertility. So the nutrients that are used, soil fertility. So the nutrients that year 1 takes out, year 2 could take out some different type of nutrients. So celery, onions, and carrots isn't going to, I'm sorry, celery, onions, and I think that's garlic, I'm not sure, but will take different nutrients from the ground than would carrots and radishes. And other than year 3, and then sweet peas would do. So it keeps the soil very fertile, or more fertile. Also, you're rotating the soil around, so it gives that topsoil, you're not using all the nutrients from the topsoil, it gives it a break. And it increases the crop yield. And when it says crop yield increase, that just means that the more crops you get by doing soil rotation, you have a better chance. So the increases are good, and soil fertility and crop yield, reduction of soil erosion is the best for that. Advantages, okay? So what are the advantages? Last slide, and disadvantages. So go ahead and pause video and copy. Okay. All right, so your advantages, crops are more nutritious. You're getting more nutrients from your crops. That's basically what that is. So more straight from the ground, hand-picked, less fertilizers and pesticides that were used. You get more of the good quality of the food. It's better for the environment overall, so no issues of leaking or seeping into water supplies. What is the disadvantages? Reduced productivity. Here you go in that same picture when we're talking about sustainable farming. The picture that you see is of more people. Okay, so more of this is picked by hand than by machine. And since it's more picked by hand than machine, there becomes an issue of paying people to do this. And since they're not machines, they cannot get as much, which makes us less profitable as well. Okay, so more stuff has to be done by hand. And then most people say crops do not taste as good. So if you ever had organic carrot versus regular carrot, organic apple versus regular apple, you might prefer the taste of the more traditionally farmed material. All right, if you have any questions, I know this was brief, but if you have any questions, let me know. I'll be more than happy to answer them for you.